As I drove down the seemingly endless dark road, I cursed my friends. A quaint little bar in the middle of nowhere, they said. Well, they got that right. There was not one blessed sign of civilization anywhere to be seen. Just then, I caught a glimpse of a lighted barn on down the road. Civilization at last, I thought. I slowed down and pulled up to the big barn. My headlights caught a number of wagons, carriages, and buggies parked beside it. They were having an old-time barn dance, I thought, as I pulled in and made my way to the door. The party was in full swing as I stepped through the large double doors. The center of the barn was filled with swirling dancers dressed in the costumes of yesteryear. These folks had gone to a great deal of trouble to recreate an authentic barn dance. A large bearded man tipped his hat in a greeting and handed me a mug of beer. I took a sip, then eagerly gulped it down. It had to be the best beer I have ever tasted. Then a dark-eyed, strapping man grabbed me by the hand and pulled me out onto the dance floor. I was flying high, dancing and drinking and singing along. Around midnight, the band took a break, and I stood with my new acquaintance before a table lined with drinks. "Give us a toast to the night," hollered my new inebriated friend. "To a delightful night," I said loudly. "Good fortune and long life to everyone present." The crowd went silent when they heard my words. The stillness grew, flowing outward like a wave until you could hear a pin drop. As I glanced around uneasily about me, I saw the skin slowly peeling away from their merry faces until all that remained were bones, rotting skin, and empty eye sockets. The man who was holding me tight in his arms was nothing but a skeleton in moldy blue jeans. With a gasp of horror, I dropped my mug and leapt away from the skeleton. The mug hit the floor with a loud bang, and the lights went out. I screamed in terror and stumbled backwards, slamming into the damp, foul, smelly pile of hay. I frantically tried to find my way to the door. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I spotted the barn doors across the hall. As I rushed towards them, withered and bony hands grabbed at me as I ran. Then I was out in the moonlight and racing to my car. I jumped into the car and backed down the lane as fast as I could. My headlights caught the dilapidated barn with half of its roof missing and sagging walls. I slammed the car into gear and drove as fast as I could. I drove down those gravel roads as fast as I could without fishtailing into a ditch. Nothing looked familiar, and I felt like I was driving in circles. Somehow I found my way back to my house and called one of my friends who had given me the directions to the party. I told him what had happened, and all he could say was, "Wow, how much have you had to drink?" There was no use trying to explain that I wasn't drunk, because I was, but I know what I had saw, and I could feel the lump on the back of my head where I had slammed against the wall. It was late, but all I wanted to do was take a shower and wash away any rotting skin that might be on me. I spent the remainder of the night unable to sleep and with all the lights on in my house. To this day, I have no idea where I was that night. I heard later that folks in that area sometimes hear strange music drifting over the hills at night, though no one can identify the source. In my mind, I can still see the bright, happy faces of the ghostly farmers dancing the night away in the rotting barn. 4,000 buried asylum patients, murderers, a chapel in ruins, and sinking graves covered with ivy. The old cemetery for the insane in Prague has been abandoned for half a century. Nevertheless, its scary reputation makes it more and more attractive to those who want a good scare. The streets at 1 a.m. were empty as I drive to the cemetery. I recall the history of the graveyard. Opened in 1906, the Bonice Cemetery was designated for the last resting place for the insane patients detained in a newly opened asylum. According to the records, the first person buried there was an 11-year-old boy. In 1913, the asylum had almost 2,000 patients. The only fully preserved gravestone in the cemetery was erected during that time. It belonged to Maria Tuma, who died in 1912 at the age of 29 because of a brain decline, an unspecified mental illness. At the time, diagnoses were made on the basis of estimates, and treatments were rather experimental. They included electric shock therapy, doses of sedatives, hydrotherapy, hot baths, and being wrapped in cold clothes. Many doctors were convinced that mental disorders might have physical causes and neural malfunctioning and could be treated with external incentives. If the patients did not calm down, they were restrained with straitjackets or placed in isolation, typically in a small room with nothing more than bare walls and a bed. The doctors there cured late-stage syphilis by giving patients blood infected with malaria. This caused high fevers and sometimes killed the bacteria, yet with very unpleasant side effects. This therapy was also used in cases of mania or schizophrenia, where it was useless. The patients died. Their bodies were supposedly buried in the cemetery by other still living patients. I turned onto a side road and traveled the last remaining miles. In this cemetery, there is also a place where murderers were buried, supposedly including the brutal killer of a woman. The body of this 22-year-old woman was cut into pieces, packed in 2 different suitcases, and were sent to 2 different places in Ukraine. One of the suspects was detained in the asylum, where he committed suicide. The graveyard also hosts 48 deceased refugees with mental disorders who were evacuated from Trident during World War I. Most of them died of typhoid fever. No wonder they say this place is deeply haunted. The cemetery became derelict after 1963 and quickly fell into decay, although rumors say that some semi-legal funerals took place during the 1970s. In the 1980s, the deserted cemetery was a place for secret satanic rituals. The current keeper of the graveyard has admitted to media that surveillance cameras recorded participants in satanic acts as late as 2008. Apart from spiritualists, ordinary people have been attracted to the graveyard as well. Crosses have been stolen and sold for iron. Tombstones have been taken down and incorporated into stairs or pathways in private houses. Additionally, the graveyard has slowly turned into a junkyard. When I get there, I jump over the wall and enter the burial ground. Immediately, I am in the middle of a sea of ivy and fallen leaves. Stick to the main road and do not wander among the graves unless you want your leg to stick and get stuck in a tomb down into the ribcage of an unknown maniac, advised an unknown blogger. My first and also very hesitant step actually causes a strange crackling. However, those are just the plastic bottles and the empty cans of beer hidden in the ivy. Respectfully, I proceed among the graves to a ruined chapel and morgue. In the very center of the graveyard, there is an open grave. Would it be worse to meet the one who used to be inside or the one who opened it? As I scan the graveyard with my flashlight, I find the only readable tombstone, the one of Maria Tuma. To the left of her gravestone was the open grave, which I kept my eye on. Do you ever feel like somebody's watching you? Beyond that was a bricked-in area that had a couple of tombstones in it. I heard what sounded like leaves crunching in that area. As I turned to look, I swear I saw a dark shadow duck behind the bricks. I was frozen and I couldn't move. As much as I wanted to go and investigate, I also wanted to hightail it out of there. I didn't run and hide, but I also didn't investigate it either. Well, eventually I did. I did stand there for quite a while and just listen to my surroundings. I started to head over there and I just felt like this was a bad idea. The closer I got, the darker it got. It was like my flashlight couldn't cut through the dark that surrounded that area. I couldn't get too close because there was a lot of weeds and sticker bushes. That was okay with me at the time. It was about 3:30 a.m. and I was ready to go, and as I headed out towards the gate, I saw a dark figure run through the tree line. I don't think a human could run as fast as that shadow went. As I shined my light in that way, I swear I saw it go up into the trees. That's just not right. That's not what's supposed to happen. Something is way off in this cemetery. And did I mention to get to the gate, I had to pass through the tree line? I scanned with my flashlight up in the trees to see if I could see anything, but it was too dark to make anything out. I felt I needed to go now and not wait around for something to happen. I headed to the gate, scanning with my flashlight, not wanting to get surprised by something that might run up on me. I was about 100 yards from the gate when all of a sudden I felt a breeze blow by me, and out of the corner of my eye, there was that shadow again that flew up into the trees. At that point, I was in a panic. I ran to the gate and climbed it, jumped and ran to my car in record time. And let's keep in mind that I'm not young and spry anymore. While leaving, I noted that there was another cemetery next to this one. It was a pet cemetery. The paths are carefully maintained there, and toys and pictures of dogs and cat covered carefully tended graves, in slightly ironical contrast to the one I was in. 200 yards from the cemetery, I saw two guys with professional cameras walking through the pet cemetery. I wasn't about to get out and tell them what had just happened to me in the asylum cemetery. I just needed out of there. They were in the pet cemetery, so they were safe from that flying shadow thing, right? As I drive past the gate, I took a picture through my window in the area where I last saw the shadow. When I got home and calmed down, I looked at the picture. I haven't been the same since.